Hey, how's it going? This is Joe Intel. Today I'm going to take a look at a few different MacBook Pros and test their sound quality. Here I have the 16-inch MacBook Pro M1 Max, the 14-inch M1 Max, an old 2013 MacBook Pro 15-inch, and another old MacBook Pro 13-inch. So I'm going to be using this calibrated mic to test out the different sounds. I'm going to test for the frequency response to see how flat the frequency response is, the flatter the better, as well as how loud in SPL sound pressure level these Macs can go. If you have one of these brand new M1 MacBook Pros, you can attest that the sound quality is really good, surprisingly good for a laptop. But this is an audio channel where I review all kinds of speakers, home theater, and I would say if you don't currently have a good audio system, whether it's a 2-channel system, home audio, home theater system, I would recommend that you check something like that out. It's just a great experience. If you like what you're hearing here, believe me, it's a whole different level once you get into good audio. You can check out some of the other videos I've done and you will see some of these speakers and sound systems I'm talking about.
So this is a binaural recording. Make sure to use headphones. Right now we're looking at the 16-inch M1 MacBook Pro, and I thought it would just be easier to play this pink noise because you'll get an idea of the differences in tonality. So make sure to use headphones again, and here we go. Here's at max volume. And just for fun, here's my voice.
Hey, how's it going? This is Joe Intel, and in this video, I want to talk to you about the Monolith Encore T6 Tower speakers. Hey, how's it going? This is Joe Intel, and in this video, I want to talk to you about the Monolith Encore T6 Tower speakers. Hey, how's it going? This is Joe Intel, and in this video, I want to talk to you about the Monolith Encore T6 Tower speakers. Hey, how's it going? This is Joe Intel, and in this video, I want to talk to you about the Monolith Encore T6 Tower speakers. Hey, how's it going? This is Joe Intel, and in this video, I want to talk to you about the Monolith Encore T6 Tower speakers.
Here we have the older MacBook Pro, and I'm running a software called RAW, which is there to test out the different frequency responses as well as other aspects of sound. Here on this side, we have the 16-inch M1 MacBook Pro. And so what we're going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and play something called pink noise, which is all of the frequencies with equal power. I'm going to be recording the sound coming out of it, and what we'll see is a frequency response. Now, the ideal frequency response is a straight line since all of the sounds are coming in at equal volume. Of course, that is almost never the case with any speaker, and especially not some small laptop speakers. For this, I'll be doing something called the moving mic method, where I'm going to be moving the mic around and taking a spatial average of this area. It's easier if I just show you. So on this one, I'm going to play sound. On this one, I'm going to hit record. So if you're not sure how to read this graph, this side is the bass frequencies, here the mid-range, and here are the higher treble frequencies. And what you can see here is that it's a rising response upwards. That was with a measurement right next to the speakers, but most people don't listen that way. Their head is actually further from the computer, and so let's take a measurement there just to see what's going on. So initially it was upward and now it's flatter, which is most likely what you're going to hear. I've measured the 14-inch M1 MacBook Pro previously, and one thing that's interesting is that the actual response changes as you increase in volume. So you see I'm clicking on 1, 2, 3. That corresponds to the number of little notches on this volume control. So I've level normalized them, but what you'll find is as you go higher and higher in volume, the bass actually starts to decrease, which means that these speakers, they can't really produce a lot of low bass, but they can at lower volumes. So they're giving you that extra bass until you start turning it up, in which case it really starts to drop the bass a lot. So as an extreme example of that, here is at level 18 versus at level 1, you can see that they've given you a lot more bass. At the highest volume, this green line, there's a lot less bass. Whereas here in the mid frequencies, here, they're about the same volume, but here in the bass frequencies, you can see a huge discrepancy. What is that? 18 decibels of difference. That's a huge difference in sound. The other thing I found that was interesting was the optimal spot with regards to volume and frequency response is right in the middle, actually. This is where you get the best bang for your buck, is at level 8. That would be right here, around there, right in the middle. One thing we look for is the -3 dB point, meaning how deep is the bass? So in this case, -3 dB from this main line. So let's say this is at 85, so around 82 hertz. Let's just say 90 hertz is as far as the bass can go. So that's not bad for some small speakers. -6 dB is still audible, and there we're around 80 hertz, which is actually very good. Another test that we like to see is the max SPL, which is how loud can it possibly get at the listening position. And I measured for the 14-inch, 85 decibels. So I'll put up a chart comparing all these so you can see. It's time for me to test the rest of these. One interesting thing to note is that you'll find the mid-range and tweeters here, and their force canceling subwoofers, kind of funny to say in a small laptop, are here on the side. You can kind of see a slight opening here, and that's where most of the bass frequencies are coming from on each side. So I just got done measuring the 16-inch M1 MacBook Pro, and wow, it's pretty amazing. Slightly different from what I saw on the 14-inch, and I am seeing some pretty impressive numbers here. Talking about bass into the 60 hertz region, which is pretty insane for a laptop. Yeah, pretty crazy. Now, it does exhibit some of the same behavior as the 14-inch, where as you turn it up, of course, it has to reduce that bass. It can't just produce all kinds of low frequency bass while being such a small device. All right, so having just tested the 14-inch, I do see some pretty big differences between that and the 16-inch. Now onto the M1 MacBook Air. I just did a test and it already sounds significantly different than the other ones. All right, old 15-inch MacBook Pro. So that was the old 15-inch MacBook Pro, and I'm pretty disappointed with the way that sounded. I don't remember it sounding that bad, but you know, maybe we're spoiled now with a lot better speakers on these smaller devices. But just in case, I was running that off of Boot Camp on Windows, and maybe they don't have optimized equalization for Boot Camp. So I'm gonna go ahead and try this old 13-inch MacBook Pro and see if this one sounds different. This is running Mac OS, so we shouldn't have that issue if there is one to begin with. I don't think it was an equalization issue. This one sounds pretty much the same as the other one, pretty bad. So I'm done measuring. Let's go back to the computer and see what some of these measurements mean. In this chart, this shows the frequency in hertz. The lower the frequency, the better, the more bass that you're gonna get. And so you can see that the M1 Max 16-inch has the lowest bass here, followed by the 14-inch M1 Max. After that, you see the M1 MacBook Air has some decent results, but not close to these. I mean, this is about half of what you're seeing on this. And the old Intel MacBook Pros, they don't do well at all. I mean, even the 13-inch M1 MacBook Air smokes these. And here we're looking at the max volume at the listening position. So again, the 16-inch MacBook Pro M1 Max is the loudest, followed by the 14-inch MacBook Pro M1 Max. And surprisingly, the 13-inch Intel MacBook Pro. Now, this is a bit deceiving because this is showing that they get to the same volume, but the sound quality of the 14-inch MacBook Pro M1 Max is significantly better with more bass. After this, at 86 decibels, you see the M1 MacBook Air. So here at 84 dB, you see the 15-inch Intel MacBook Pro, but this was running Windows in Boot Camp, so I think that this is a number that should be more similar to this 88 over here. So again, the sound quality, even though it's the same volume, is not on par with the newer M1 MacBook Pros. So here are all the frequency responses. Let's take a look first at the 16-inch right at the speakers. So you can see that this is a pretty flat-ish response. I mean, you know, compared to some other speakers, of course, this is not super flat, but here is where it's interesting.
in the bass region. Let's just say that on average this is about 85 decibels. The -3 dB point would be here around 67 hertz, 68 hertz, somewhere around here. That is crazy. -6 dB would be at 79, which is here at 63 hertz. And just for fun, let's do -10 dB. This is still audible. That is here around 58 hertz. That is crazy. The other thing you'll notice, there's a dip here in this region and then a spike in this area. This is kind of the area where our ears are very sensitive, and then the treble increases. Compare that to what you'd normally hear about a foot away, and you can see the response is different. Definitely not as loud as being right up next to the speaker. So let's take a look at the max SPL. This is how loud it can possibly go at your listening position. And let's say here, this is around 89 decibels on average. So one thing to notice again is look at the drop off in bass response when you turn it up to the max level. You can see peaks here in the 98 decibel region, but that's not how this is calculated. This says here that it was about 89.3 decibels on average. So just to keep things a little bit simpler, I'm gonna use something called psychoacoustic smoothing, which basically is just how we hear. There we go. So again, looking at the near field response, pretty respectable for laptop speakers. Now let's compare this to the 14-inch. So here's the 14-inch model, and this is right up next to the speaker. So you'll notice that the two responses are very different. In orange is the 14-inch, and it's much brighter at the speakers themselves. Interesting. The other thing you'll notice is the drop-off point for the bass is not as low as this one. So let's say the best possible bass response you can get from the 14-inch, 86 decibels is the median point. So 3 down from that would be around here, 80 hertz. All right, not bad. -6 dB would be here at 70 hertz, and -10 dB right around 63 hertz. So what we're noticing is that the 16-inch gets about 10 hertz deeper, which is audible. So this is the response at the main listening position. The max SPL for these is 87.9 dB, and comparing that to the 16-inch. So as you can see here, the 16-inch is about the same max volume, but it still has deeper bass extension. There's not much difference here below 120 hertz, but let's just say at 200 hertz, there is a difference of about 6 decibels. So that is definitely an audible difference. Now, just for fun, I'm gonna keep the near field response of the 16-inch up, and let's take a look at this 13-inch M1 MacBook Air near, and you can tell definitely has a different response. Not nearly as much bass. I would say if we're talking about 84 dB as the median point, around 78, we're down to 115 hertz, and 10 dB down from that would be still 100 hertz. So nowhere close to the bass frequencies. So when they say that the new M1 MacBooks are an octave lower, I would say, yeah, definitely. 100 hertz is here, 1 octave down would be at 50. Boom, it lines up with their marketing. Let me go ahead and just look at the main listening position for the Air and the max SPL. So the max SPL here is 86 dB compared to the M1, which is 89. So the M1 Air still can get pretty loud, but again, doesn't have the same bass extension. Comparing it to the 14-inch max SPL, the 14-inch also has significantly more bass extension. So let's put the 16-inch near field response back up here. And let's take a look at the old MacBook 15-inch near field. Oh, ooh, that's rough. That basically this has no bass, right? So you can see here near field, yeah, that's not good. At the main listening position, looks like pretty much the same thing with just less volume. And the max SPL on this, 83 decibels. So it doesn't get as loud as the new MacBooks, and it definitely doesn't have anywhere near as much bass extension. So just to make sure, here is the 13-inch MacBook Pro, and you can see same basic response where it doesn't have very much bass below. I mean, we're talking about 700 hertz. This is way, way different in sound. And this is at the main listening position, the max SPL being 87 dB. So one thing I did notice is in boot camp running Windows, it wasn't able to get as loud as when it wasn't in boot camp. So maybe they have some optimization that they do in the Mac OS, which allows it to get louder, because it doesn't really make sense that the 13-inch can get louder than the 15-inch here. Wow, these really have no bass. All right, so there you have it. Could you hear the difference in the binaural demos? Let me know in the comments below.
Anyway, if you like the video, make sure to like, subscribe, ring the bell to be notified when I upload videos. Take care. Bye-bye.